'Tis I, Microphone Man. Today we have come to talk about Solaris. So Solaris is a pretty straightforward movie from Andrei Tarkovsky, a Russian filmmaker, most notable for, I would say, Stalker. I think that's his best movie that I've seen, at least, and I've seen two of them, this one and that one's much better than this one. But Solaris is a straightforward sci-fi movie based on a novel. It's about a guy. This guy happens to be a psychologist, and he's recruited for a mission to go to a space station called Solaris, which is hovering over this mysterious planet with this mysterious ocean. He goes there, and all hell breaks loose. And that's essentially the premise of Solaris. But part one is all set up, and it's excruciating. Part one almost made me quit on the movie. Actually, it did. I fell asleep, legitimately, at 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday after getting 8 hours of sleep. It put me to sleep. I'm not kidding. It was so boring. It was exhausting. There's just so much exposition in this. It's this scene after scene of just talking, wordy talking. No, you have to do this. I don't want to do that. You have to do that. This is what happened to me. I want to do this. And then there's a 5-minute sequence of just cars driving around in Tokyo. Because I guess it was expensive and the crew felt like they should put the whole shooting scenes in the movie to justify it. But they shouldn't have, because it sucks and it's boring. And then he goes to Solaris and finds out that there's weird things afoot. And that's our first act. That's part one. It's exhausting. It's what I just described in 2 minutes or less. I don't even know. 2 minutes is 45 minutes to an hour of this movie. It could have been trimmed in half. And I'm not exaggerating. It's exhausting. I hated the first part of the movie. It's still good looking, still well performed, still has very good technical qualities, but goddamn, is it too much. It is so boring. I know this is the exact type of thing I would think of when people say that these types of movies are boring, because they're typically not. Part two is not, but part one, I get it. Part 2 of Solaris is distinctly different than Part 1, not just because it's significantly better, but because it all takes place on the Solaris space station, which has these weird things going on. There's guests, as they call them, showing up, which are these figments of people's imagination that are rendered very real, and they can touch them, they can interact with them, they can feel them, and they can love them. So we get this story of love between our main character, Chris Kelvin, and his 10 years now dead wife, Hari, whatever her name is, or how it's pronounced. And it's this very long love story between these two where we learn about them, and all of it is done through the lens of Andrei Tarkovsky's great direction. It's very observational. It's very, hey, we're going to just drift over here and check out this piece of art in the room. We're going to look at this table. And part of that is just observing things and showing the habitat, showing where they're living, which is nice to see. We get to see how they're living. We get to see how they're feeling. We get to see what makes them tick and what they have in their environment and why it's there. I love that stuff, but it's also a great way to hide certain things. And that's something I loved about watching this, is just seeing how the craft of filmmaking was tackled. You have multiple characters that are playing the same person. So Hari is coming to Chris in multiple variations of herself. And there's a couple of sequences where they have to have multiple of her in the same place. So they have stunt doubles, actors, stand-ins, standing in, and with their backs to the camera or doing something else so that the camera can pan across and show that there's multiple of her. Or in the case of this one time when she breaks through a steel wall, which was very kind of awkwardly handled, but that's whatever. And she's all bloodied up and cut, and then it pans over away from her, pans back, and it's another person's arm that they have a different prosthetic on, showing that she's healing rapidly. And then they pan over, and then she's back, and they can fix her makeup to make her look like that other person. It's a really interesting way of tackling kind of low-budget filmmaking. But let's get back on track with the thematics of this movie. Someone's perspective is completely different than your own. I mean, if you just zoom down the road, just right outside your house, there's 30 houses in a 2-block radius, maybe less, maybe more. And inside every single one of them is at least one person, maybe 4, maybe 6, maybe 3. And all of those people, you'll never know. There's a good chance you'll never know. And if you do meet them, their perspective is going to be so wildly different than yours, then you may as well just not understand them anyway.
А Крис меня любит. Может быть, он не меня любит, а просто защищается от самого себя, правда? Хочет мною живой. Дело не в этом. Не важно, почему человек любит. Это у всех по-разному.
It's also about love and how we need to move on from it when the time is right. Love is a strong emotion that can bring two people together, but it's also a strong emotion that once it leaves can rip people apart. And this is about trying to understand where to go with your life after love ceases. It happens twice to our main character with the same woman. He leaves her once because he's scared, he wants to leave, they argue a lot, and she kills herself, and he doesn't know how to handle that. He goes on with his life, but maybe not, maybe as a shell of himself. And then the Hari that he sees on Solaris is not who he wanted her to be either. She's a copy of someone he knew, and when he has to inevitably leave her, he has to move on from her as well, and he has to understand that the experiences he had and they had together, while are still great, you have to find a way to move along with your life. And it's going to be difficult, and you have to understand that there are going to be some sacrifices you're going to have to make to move on. And that's something I loved about this. He frequently talks about how he's just going to stay on the space station to be with Hari. He's going to make sacrifices to be there, and it's just not sustainable. It's not reasonable, and eventually she disappears, and now what do you do when you're forced to move along? You have to go home. You have to make a life for yourself. You have to move along. It's great stuff. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. There's a lot of philosophical and existential questions it asks that I'm not going to go completely into. And I found them all very interesting. All the characters felt real. They felt tangible. They felt like people. And the dialogue is great. It's crisp. It's relatable. It's human. The whole story feels really good in part 2. It just flows. The pacing is great. Even though it's 2 hours, I was not bored at all in this segment. I just found myself really enthralled by everything that was happening. Entranced is a good word for it. Mesmerized. There's some excellent visuals that were stunning. There's some great character work. There's some really interesting questions it's tackling and trying to flesh out. Lots of great stuff in this. I thoroughly enjoyed Solaris, although I do wish to a certain point that it was better, because some of it is amazing and some of it is just not good or up to par. So it's a weird one. It's an odd one. This is the third 3-hour movie in a row that we've watched. So I understand that some people don't like long movies, and watching them with me 3 in a row is probably not super sustainable. So we're going to watch something a little bit shorter this week. Okay, so how I'm going to be choosing next week's movie is on HBO Max, or just Max now, which is a stupid-ass name. And I'm going to be using this segment called Because You Watched Solaris, and we're just going to go at random. I'm just going to go down. I know the first one was Fantastic Planet, so I'm just going to go over like crazy. I'm going to go back like 4 or 5 this way. We're going to come back this way. And this is our movie. Let's select it. And it is Scanners. Okay, perfect. An hour 44. Just like I wanted. Scanners. Let's do it. Next week. Be here or be a fucking loser. See ya.